even after understanding so many instructions on this matter. It is also an offense to be inattentive while chanting. Every devotee who claims to be Vaishnava must guard against these offenses in order to achieve the desired success of Krishna Prema. Hare Krishna. Once again, I welcome all the devotees to Bhakti Sangha Chipa conference call. May I know who all joined this morning?
Hare Krishna, Vinita Gandharva Mataji. Please accept my humble obeisances. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Guru Maharaj ki jai. This is Aditi Devi Dasi in Canada.
Hare Krishna, Aditi Mataji, Dandavat Pranam, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you so much, Mataji, for joining and giving your association. Welcome to the call.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Mataji. Hare Krishna, Balavrinda. Welcome to the call. Thank you for joining in.
Hare Krishna, Vinita Gandharvika Mataji, Dandavat Pranam, all glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to Guru Maharajas, and all glories to the assembled devotees. And it's so lovely to see you back. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Tiffany Mataji, Dandavat Pranam, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you so much, Mataji, for joining every day and giving your association. Welcome to the call.
Hare Krishna, Panching Pranam Mataji, Sangeeta here from Mumbai.
Hare Krishna, Sangeeta Mataji, Dandavat Pranam, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Welcome to the call. Thank you so much for joining in.
Hare Krishna, Vinita Gandharvika Mataji, all glories to Srila Prabhupada and Guru Maharaj. My humble obeisances to you and all the devotees. This is Krishna Kumari Devidas. Nice to see you.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Kumari Mataji, Dandavat Pranam, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you so much, Mataji, for joining every single day and giving your association. Welcome to the call.
Hare Krishna Mataji, Dandavat Pranam. Please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada and Shri Guru and Gauranga and all the assembled devotees. Yashamati from Chicago. Happy Ekadashi and nice to see you, Mataji, again. Welcome back.
Hare Krishna, Yashmati Mataji, Dandavat Pranam, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you so much, Mataji, for joining and giving your association. Welcome to the call. Happy Ekadasi to everyone. Hari Bol. This is the last Ekadasi. First Ekadasi in this year.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna, Vinita Mataji. Please accept my humble obeisances. Nice to see you back. This is Preeti Vilasni Devidasi from Atlanta.
Hare Krishna, Preeti Vilasni Mataji, Dandavat Pranam, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you so much, Mataji, for joining and giving your sweet association. All glories to your services. Welcome to the call. Waiting to hear your class, Mataji, in the morning.
Hare Krishna, Vinita Mataji, and thus pranams to you all devotees here. Glories to Guru Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada, and Gauranga. This is Eka Radhika Lila Devidasi. Happy
Hare
Ekadashi.
Krishna. Hare Krishna, Eka Radhika Mataji, Dandavat Pranam, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you so much, Mataji, for joining so constantly and giving your association. Welcome to the call.
Hare Krishna, Vinita Gandharvika Mataji, Dandavat Pranam, Srila Prabhupada, Shri Guru Maharaj ki jai. This is Shamagari Devdasi from Shalini.
Hare Krishna, Shamagari Mataji. Nice to see you, Mataji. Dandavat Pranam, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Welcome to the call. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Welcome back, Mataji. Nice to see you.
Mataji.
Hare Krishna, Vinita Gandharvika Mataji. Please accept all obeisances. All glories to Shri Prabhupada and all the assembled. This is Indulekha Karna Devi Dasi from Lake.
Hare Krishna, Indulekha Karuna Mataji, Dandavat Pranam, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Welcome to the call, Mataji. Hope you are fine. Is your voice breaking or you have cold? Hare Krishna.
This call Mataji, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Vinita Gandharvika Mataji. Senses, all glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to the assembled devotees. This is Anita Ramya from Sharjah. Very happy Ekadashi and welcome me back, Mataji, and back into action. Too nice to see you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Anita Mataji, Dandavat Pranam, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you so much, Mataji, for joining and giving your association. Welcome to the call.
Hare Krishna Mataji, Dandavat Pranam, all glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to all the assembled devotees. This is Sushmita from Canada.
Hare Krishna, Sushmita Mataji, Dandavat Pranam, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you so much, Mataji, for joining every day and giving your association. Welcome to the call.
Hare Krishna Mataji, Dandavat Pranam. I offer my best wishes to all the assembled devotees, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. This is Anand from West Bengal. Happy Ekadashi Mataji, and nice to see you, Mataji.
Hare Krishna and welcome to the call. Thank you so much for joining every single day and all glories to your services. Hari Bol.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna, is there anybody who would like to introduce themselves?
Hare Krishna Mataji, Dandavat Pranam, all glories to Prabhupada and Gurudev. This is Radhika from
Hare Krishna, Sri Radha Mataji, Dandavat Pranam, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you so much for joining and giving your recitation. Welcome to the call. Hare Krishna, is there anybody who would like to introduce themselves? We don't see still Prabhuji on the call.
Prabhuji is there, Mataji.
Is there? Okay. Then we'll start the recording, Mataji. Hare Krishna, everyone. Welcome to Bhakti Sangha Japa conference call. Today we are very fortunate to have His Grace Radhika Vallabha Prabhu to enlighten us on the topic of Srimad Bhagavatam, 6th canto, 5th chapter, 41 verse. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you so much, Prabhu, for joining and giving your valuable time and association and enlightening us on the topic of Srimad Bhagavatam. I now hand over the call to you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna. Nice to see you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Okay. Begin. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye Nashtaprayeshvabhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavatir Uttamashloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki Krishnaya Vasudevaya Devaki Nandanaya Cha Nandagopakumaraya Govindaya Namo Namaha. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshuronmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namagom Vishnupadaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin Iti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shrivasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So today we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, 6th canto, chapter 5, text number 41. Nanubhuya na janati puman vishayatikshnataam nirvidyate swayam tasman na tatha bhinnadi paraihi. Word to word translation: na not, anubhuya experiencing, na not, janati knows, puman a person, vishaya tikshnatam the sharpness of material enjoyment, nirvidyate becomes aloof, swayam himself, tasmat from that, na tatha not like that, bhinnadihi whose intelligence is changed, paraihi by others. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Translation: material enjoyment is indeed the cause of all unhappiness. But we cannot give it up unless one has personally experienced how much suffering it is. Therefore, one should be allowed to remain in so-called material enjoyment while simultaneously advancing in knowledge to experience the misery of this false material happiness. Then, without help from others, one will find material enjoyment detestful. Those whose minds are changed by others do not become as renounced as those who have personal experience. Purport: it is said that unless a woman becomes pregnant, she cannot understand the trouble of giving birth to a child. Bandhya ki bujibe prasava vedana. The word bandhya means a sterile woman. Such a woman cannot give birth to a child. How then can she perceive the pain of delivery? According to the philosophy of Prajapati Daksha, a woman should first become pregnant and then experience the pain of childbirth. Then, if she is intelligent, she will not want to be pregnant again. Actually, however, this is not a fact. Sex enjoyment is so strong that a woman becomes pregnant and suffers at the time of childbirth, but she becomes pregnant again despite her experience. According to Daksha's philosophy, one should become implicated in material enjoyment so that after experiencing the distress of such enjoyment, one will automatically renounce. Material nature, however, is so strong that although a man suffers at every step, he will not cease his attempts to enjoy. Tripyanti neha kripana bahudukka bhaja. Under the circumstances, unless one gets the association of a devotee like Narada Muni or his servant in the disciplic succession, one's dormant spirit of renunciation cannot be awakened. It is not a fact that because material enjoyment involves so many painful conditions, one will automatically become detached. One needs the blessings of a devotee like Narada Muni. Then one can renounce his attachment for the material world. The young boys and girls of the Krishna consciousness movement have given up the spirit of material enjoyment, not because of practice, but by the mercy of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his servants. Hare Krishna. It's a very beautiful verse from the Daksha's speech to Narada Muni. Daksha Prajapati is saying that Nanubhuya, I'll read the verse again. Nanubhuya na janati puman vishaya tikshnatam nirvidyate swayam tasman na tatha binnadi paraihi. So na anubhuya means without experiencing. Na janati, without experiencing, one does not know, or one cannot know. A puman, who cannot know? A puman, a man, a person. What he cannot know? Vishaya tikshnatam. He cannot understand or he cannot realize the pains of material enjoyment or sharpness of material enjoyment. That means every material enjoyment has miseries associated with it. Without experiencing, one cannot understand it. This is the Daksha's point. And then, nirvidyate swayam tasman na tatha binnadi paraihi. So, nirvidyate swayam tasman. So, a person, na tatha binnadi paraihi. Binnadi paraihi means a person who is externally canvassed or externally brainwashed, a person whose mind is brainwashed or torn up by others. Binnadi means specifically like whose mind is torn up by others' ideas. Such a person will not become as detached as a person who personally experienced the pains of material enjoyment. So nirvidyate swayam tasman. Swayam tasman means a person who personally experienced the pains of material enjoyment by going through it. Such a person will develop a greater detachment than a person whose mind is brainwashed or whose mind is torn up by others' ideas. So Daksha Prajapati is saying that Vishnu Chakotipat in his purport, he says that, I'll read the Sanskrit purport. Vishnu Chakotipat says that Tasmat Tattva Manabhigyo Rajamargam Mattaha Shunu Ituaha. Shunu. Rajamargam Mattaha. Now I'm going to tell you the royal path of detachment. Royal path of detachment. So, Tasmat Tattvam Anabhigyo. You have no knowledge. You are not aware of the reality. You have no knowledge. Hear from me the royal path of detachment. Rajamargam Mattaha. Na iti Vishayanam Tikshnatam. Vishayanam Tikshnatam means what? Tikshnatam means Dukkha Pradatvam. How the sense gratification gives miseries. Vishayanam Tikshnatam. Anubhuya na janati. Without experiencing, one cannot understand how the sense gratification gives miseries. Ataha tasmad vishaya bhogottadeva. Therefore, only by experiencing sense enjoyment, tadiya tikshnatva jnanat. Only by experiencing material enjoyment, one can understand the miseries of sense gratification. By that, swayameva nirvidyata, one automatically becomes detached. By that, one will naturally become detached. Swayameva nirvidyata. Yata na tata parais twadrishair binnadihi vidirnamatihi. But on the other hand, when a person's mind is torn up, when a person's mind is brainwashed or torn up by others, one cannot develop a solid detachment. As a person develops detachment naturally by experiencing sense gratification. So Daksha Prajapati is telling that one must experience the path of fruitive activities and go through the miseries through the path of fruitive activities. Then a person will naturally develop detachment, one will develop a strong detachment. That is the argument of Daksha Prajapati. So Prabhupada is talking about the Prasava Vairagya here. So there are actually 3 types of Vairagya. In these 3 types of Vairagya, a person develops only Vairagya temporarily. The first is Abhava Vairagya. That means a person is desiring some sense enjoyment, but is unable to obtain it. So because of unable to obtain it, a person develops a detachment. But moment a person obtains that, the detachment will go away. A fox was trying to eat some grapes, but he was not able to reach out to the grapes. Then the fox declared that, all the grapes are sour in this particular garden. The moment, suppose the fox is able to reach out to that garden, the detachment will vanish. This is Abhava Vairagya. Abhava means absence. In the absence of sense gratification, a person develops detachment. And second is Smashana Vairagya, a Vairagya at a crematorium. So crematorium, many times the people develop a detachment at a crematorium. But that also does not last long. Oftentimes there are like stories of one devotee was sharing. He went on some country abroad. There was a particular area where all the things related to the cremation will be sold in that particular market. And he saw that in that market, everything, whatever you see, everything will remind you of death. But within that also, a couple was romancing in that particular market. So he said, how powerful is the Maya. So smashana vairagya, detachment at a crematorium, that also does not last long. And the third is the prasava vairagya. That means when a person is going through certain difficulties, I will not just say childbirth, in general, when a person is going through certain difficulties, at that time a person may develop detachment. But then once the difficulties vanish, that sense of detachment, a person may forget the sense of detachment also. Again, one may indulge in that same activity which resulted in that difficulties. So that is prasava vairagya. So we see, so therefore, real vairagya, Daksha's argument is that only by experiencing enjoyment, a person and going through the miseries, then a person can develop sustained detachment. But actually speaking, that is not true in reality. Therefore, the Prabhupada is giving the example of a prasava vairagya. So Prabhupada, when he mentioned, Prabhupada in some places he said, a person can develop real detachment when a person has transcendental knowledge. So what is required for stable vairagya? Two things: transcendental knowledge and higher taste. These two are required for stable vairagya. So therefore he emphasized the importance of Shastric study. In one letter to Bhargava Prabhu, he said, our advancement in Krishna consciousness is made possible in two ways, by knowledge and detachment, jnana and tapasya. The more we become renounced from this material world, the more we advance in Krishna consciousness. But we are only able to make such sacrifices and perform tapasya if we have got knowledge. So the first thing is to become knowledgeable in Krishna consciousness. Then a person will start a voluntary life of tapasya. So therefore, you see, a tapasya has to be self-inspired. A life of renunciation should be a self-inspired decision. Sometimes external push may be required, but even that detachment a person takes up by external push, that cannot sustain till that renunciation comes to the point of self-inspired renunciation. It's like in the case of Dhritarashtra, yes, external push was required from Vidura. In the case of Prachina Barishat, external push was required from Narada Muni. But in the case of the Pandavas, it was a self-inspired renunciation. On their own, they decided to renounce. In the case of Prithu Maharaj, it was a self-inspired renunciation. When he saw the old age, he decided to retire on his own. So the self-inspired renunciation will come when there is a proper training and proper education. So I'll mention some quotes regarding that also in due course. So Prabhupada says in this letter, therefore I am requesting all of my students to read my books very seriously every day without fail. In this way, if your mind becomes absorbed at least 1 or 2 hours daily in Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita and other books, then very easily you will make advancement in Krishna consciousness. In another letter to Madhudvisha Prabhu, Prabhupada says, I am very much stressing at this point that all of my students shall be very much conversant with the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, and that they should read our books very diligently, at least 1 or 2 hours daily, and try to understand the subject matter from varieties of angles. And then we discuss the subject matter very minutely and inspect it from all angles of approach and savor the new understandings. So you introduce the system in all of the centers in your zone, and you will discover that everyone becomes very much enlivened by these daily classes. So if the students get knowledge more and more, they will automatically become convinced and very easily perform their duties for tapasya or renunciation of the material bondage. And that will be their successful advancement in Krishna consciousness. This is from these two are from the letters. Another purport from the first canto, 13th chapter, about the importance of knowledge for detachment. So Prabhupada says, when Dhritarashtra left home, Sanjaya studied the situation in his own way. Sanjaya was always giving counsel to Dhritarashtra. He couldn't see Dhritarashtra, and Sanjaya became aggrieved, and he could not properly reply to the queries of Yudhishthira Maharaj. So Sanjaya did not know that the inner vision of Dhritarashtra had been awakened by Vidura, and therefore Dhritarashtra had left home in enthusiastic cheerfulness for a better life after departure from the dark well of home. So then Prabhupada says, unless one is convinced of a better life after renunciation of the present life, one cannot stick to the renounced order of life simply by artificial dress or staying out of the home. So therefore, simply by changing the dress, one cannot sustain in that platform. One has to be convinced of the better life after renunciation of the present life. So that can come only by transcendental knowledge. And of course, a higher taste is also required. So therefore, the sustainable, stable platform for renunciation is transcendental knowledge and a higher taste. And we will discuss when we talk about like here, Vishaya Tikshnatam, the word comes. That means when a person experiences sense gratification, one can understand the miseries of sense enjoyment. So actually, Prabhupada says in Nectar of Instruction, very first verse, he talks about 4 levels of intelligence. The first class intelligence is that a person hears and then understands that, okay, sense gratification leads to misery, and then he understands that. Second class intelligence is that simply by hearing, he doesn't understand. He sees others experiencing the miseries, and then he learns the lesson. Third class intelligence is that a person understands only after himself experiencing. And the fourth class intelligence is that a person does not learn even after experiencing himself. One may have to go through repeated experiences. Actually, what Daksha is suggesting is third class intelligence. He says that is the only way. But actually, before that, there are 2 ways. By hearing and by seeing the other's experience, being observant, seeing the world based on what we have heard, being observant and seeing the world with our higher intelligence. It means seeing for example, the 7th canto, 14th chapter, this Avaduta Brahmana, he says that I observed in this world that people who are engaged in fruitive activities, ultimately they are not happy. They go through miseries. He is advocating the second class intelligence. Therefore, after observing that, therefore, I have retired from the path of fruitive activities. So what Daksha is advocating is the third class intelligence. He says that is the only way. But before that, there are 2 ways of intelligence, 2 better ways. So Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita, 5th chapter, Bahya Sparshes Asaktatma Vindatyatmani Yat Sukam Sa Brahma Yoga Yuktatma Sukam Akshaya Mashnute. So, Bahya Sparsheshu. So, Bahya, different sense objects having sound, fragrance, etc. Sparsheshu, contact with those sense objects. Asaktatma, being detached from those sense objects. Vindat Atmani Yat Sukam. A person, Vindat Atmani Yat Sukam, a person experiences the bliss of Atma. Sab Brahma Yoga Yuktatma. Brahma Yoga Yuktatma, with his mind engaged in continuous contemplation of Jivatma. Sukam Akshaya Mashnute. A person attains unlimited bliss or everlasting bliss. So in this verse, Krishna talks about 3 types of happiness. Bahya Sparseshu, happiness from external sense objects. And then Atmani Sukam, happiness because of hearing the Upadesha on Atma, a person experiences certain happiness in Atma. This is second level of happiness. And then Akshayam Sukam, this is everlasting happiness from attaining Atma Sakshatkara. So 3 levels of happiness he is talking about. So here one may get a question. Since time immemorial, a conditioned soul is absorbed in the happiness of worldly objects. So how can a person give up those worldly objects? So therefore Krishna says in the next verse, Yehi samsparshaja boga dukkha yonaya evate adyantavanta kaunteya nateshu ramate buddha. So Krishna talks about 2 doshas in the fault of sense, 2 faults in the sense enjoyment. One is dukkha yonaya. All the happiness and sense gratification is always mixed with some distress. Or any sense enjoyment will always give birth to some distress. This is the first dosha. And second dosha is that adyantavanta. It has a beginning and an end. It has a beginning and end. So therefore, one who understands that these 2 doshas in the sense enjoyment, nateshu ramate buddha, such a person will not enjoy. An intelligent person will not enjoy. He avoids them and he instead pursues Atma Sakshatkar. Elsewhere, 5 doshas are explained in sense enjoyment. What are the 5 doshas? First is Arjana dosham. So while putting effort to attain the sense objects, in that effort itself, there are so many difficulties in earning the wealth and different things. This is the first Arjana dosham. Second is Rakshana dosham. There is in protecting what we have earned, in maintaining what we have earned for pursuing sense gratification, in that effort of maintaining or protection, in that also there are miseries. So that is Rakshana dosham. Third is Kshaya dosham. How much ever facilities or wealth we may have earned for sense enjoyment, that will eventually deteriorate. That is the third dosham, Kshaya dosham. And the fourth is Bhoga dosham. And when we are actually experiencing sense gratification, it will create a craving for enjoying more and more. Najatu kama kamanam upabhogena shamyati havisha krishna vartmeva bhuya evabi vardate. Just by supplying butter to a fire does not diminish the fire, but instead increases it more and more. Similarly, the endeavor to stop kama by continual enjoyment can never be successful. On the other hand, it increases more and more. And the fifth is the himsa dosham. In getting any sense gratification, we end up giving some trouble to some living entity or other. We end up giving some violence, committing some violence to some living entity. In this way, there are 5 doshas in sense gratification. Krishna mentions 2 doshas in the 5.22. So a person who understands this by hearing, and then a person refrains, he becomes first class intelligent. Another point, when we see in the Srimad Bhagavatam, there are repeated themes of detachment and transcendental knowledge. That is the theme of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Oftentimes, like some of the purports in the Srimad Bhagavatam, verses in the Srimad Bhagavatam, they can be quite heavy actually, especially for a person who is following the path of fruitive enjoyment. Because Narada Muni spoke to Haryashvas by giving the Bhagavata Dharma and by giving the path of detachment. Daksha Prajapati is involved in the path of fruitive enjoyment, fruitive activities. He couldn't appreciate the instructions of Narada Muni. He considered the instructions of Narada Muni like a brainwashing exercise. That is how he thought. So Bhagavatam, the 12th canto, there is a verse which says that in the Bhagavatam we find so many stories of different kings actually. And what is the purpose of narrating the stories of different kings and the dynasties? Katha yimaste katita mahiyasam vithaya lokeshu yashappareyusham Vijnana vairagya vivakshaya vibo vacho vibhutir natu paramartyam. Shukdev Goswami is telling to Parikshit Maharaj, because if you see the first 3 chapters of the 12th canto, there are different dynasties of the kings are mentioned. O mighty Parikshit, I have related to you the narrations of all these great kings who spread their fame throughout the world and then departed. My real purpose in narrating these stories was twofold. Vijnana Vairagya Vivakshaya was to teach transcendental knowledge, Vijnana, and renunciation. Stories of kings lend power and opulence to these narrations, but do not in themselves constitute the ultimate aspect of knowledge. So there are while narrating the stories, the power of these stories, the power of these kings, that may be explained in due course of the stories. But they are only secondary aspect. But the real purpose of the stories is Vijnana and Vairagya. Just like, suppose when you are making a, say, preparation, suppose there is a lemon rice is made. So the main thing, say in the lemon rice, we can say 2 ingredients, rice and lemon. But apart from that, there may be many other ingredients, but they are only in the background. They only add a taste to this thing. So similarly, the main purpose of narrating the stories is Vijnana and Vairagya. But the other aspects of the stories, like suppose, a king had 1 crore wives, Chitraketu Maharaj, which shows the power of Chitraketu Maharaj's influence. Or he was a Saptadvipa Pati. He was such a powerful king. He ruled over the entire Saptadvipa. So these informations are like the rai and the jeera we add in the lemon rice. But the main thing is the Vijnana and Vairagya. So that is the purpose with which in the Bhagavatam these stories are narrated. And going ahead, there is also, of course, Shastras also talk about what this Daksha Prajapati is telling, that one cannot become detached unless a person directly experiences sense gratification. The Shastras also talk about this path. Shastras also talk about this path. In fact, a verse is there directly in the Bhagavatam itself. There is a verse in 10th canto, 84th chapter, 37th verse. Vittaishanam yajnadanair grihair dara sutaishanam atma lokaishanam deva kalena visrijed buddha grame tyaktaishana sarve yayur dhiras tapovanam. An intelligent person, Buddha, there are three kinds of desires. What are the three desires? One is a desire for wealth, and second is desire for wife and children, and third is desire to get promoted to higher planets. So how can a person overcome these three types of desires? So it's explained that an intelligent person should learn to renounce his desire for wealth, Vittaishanam yajnadanair, by performing sacrifices and by giving charity. By giving charity to the right person at the right time and in the proper mood. In the proper mood. I was hearing a class, because I don't have exact Shastri quotation, but from a very reliable person. So he said, when it comes to charity, before giving charity, in what mood charity should be given. So he said, 1 minute. He said, charity should be given. Before giving charity, one must fast for some time. One must fast for 3 days or 1 day, or at least for a few hours. And second, while giving charity, one should consider oneself to be inferior and the person who is accepting charity to be superior. That means one should not give charity in a superiority complex. One should think that, oh, this person is giving an opportunity for me to perform service. This person is merciful upon me. That he is actually giving me the opportunity to give charity. So one should think that the person who is accepting charity to be superior. And third is, one should remember the Supreme Lord and give charity. That means one should think that actually, ultimately, it is Lord, everything is Lord's property. I am not the well-wisher. It is just Lord is giving me the opportunity to perform this service. And the fourth point is something somewhere later. So in this way, even while giving charity, one should have the right mood actually. One may fast for some time. One should think the person who is accepting charity to be superior, one should remember the Supreme Lord, like that. So here anyway, coming back here, that one Bhagavatam says that one should give up the desire, renounce the desire for wealth by performing sacrifice and by acts of charity. Performing sacrifice, we can say that in the current times, that by using the wealth for Sankirtan Yajna, for preaching or for dharmic activities. And then one should learn to renounce this desire for wife and children by experiencing family life. This verse is also there in the Bhagavatam. Grihair dara sutaishanam atma lokaishanam deva. And then one should learn to renounce the desire. One should learn to renounce his desire for promotion to a higher planet in his next life by studying the effects of time, by studying the nature of time. Self-controlled sages who have thus renounced their attachment to household life go to the forest to perform austerities. So this kind of path is also mentioned in the scriptures, because the scriptures give programs for people various people who have various adhikaras. who have various levels of eligibility. So for certain people who have certain adhikar, even this gradual path of experiencing family life and then renounce the desire for wife and children. That path is recommended in the Shastra also. But at the same time, there are people who don't have to go through that, because Narada Muni, right in the beginning of the chapter, Narada Muni, when he saw the Haryeshwas, he could see that, oh, these people are highly pure, and they don't have to get entangled in the Grahastha ashram. They don't have to go through this path. So Narada Muni could see that the adhikar for these people. Daksha Prajapati could not see that could not see the mindset of his own sons. He saw that, oh, they have to go through this path. So in this way, based on the level of adhikar of the people, the scriptures recommend various paths. And another point here, Prabhupada says that he talks about the blessings of the devotees. So Daksha Prajapati is saying that only when a person goes through that path of sense enjoyment, then a person can get renounced. But when a person gets the blessings of a devotee, without going through that path, one can develop the detachment. So actually, Narada Muni definitely not only gave his blessings, Narada Muni gave transcendental knowledge. In that Kuta Shloka, he gave transcendental knowledge, and the Haryeshwas, they understood the import of the transcendental knowledge and they became renounced. Narada Muni gave transcendental knowledge, he also gave blessings. And Narada Muni, he also saw that these people were already so pure. So therefore, they did not go through this path. So normally speaking, that without going through the path of, say, Grahastha ashram, without going through the path of sense enjoyment, to develop a deep sense of detachment is practically impossible. It is very difficult actually. It is usually the normal path is a person has to go through the 4 ashramas: Brahmachari, Grahastha, Vanaprastha and Sannyas. And this point is also mentioned by Srila Prabhupada in the 9th canto purport. The Yayati story, Yayati asked Yadu Maharaj, Yayati asked his son Yadu to give his youth. Yayati was cursed by Shukracharya to become old, but then he wanted to get back his youth to enjoy. And he asked his sons, can you give your youth and take my old age, and then after enjoying, I will return your youth back to you. At that time, when he asked Yadu actually refused to give his youth. And when we read the purport, Prabhupada is telling that normally the gradual path is only recommended. So I will read that part of the purport. Like Yadu is telling that Notsahe jarasa statum antara praptaya tava aviditva sukam gramyam vaitrishyam naiti purushaha. My dear father, you have already achieved old age, although you also were a young man. But I do not welcome your old age and invalidity, for unless one enjoys material happiness, one cannot attain renunciation. So here, Yadu, of course, why Yadu refused, there are 2 reasons are given. One reason is that because Yadu knew that Krishna is going to appear in my dynasty, and therefore I don't want to delay the appearance of my Krishna in my dynasty. If I give the youth to Yayati and Yayati returns the youth to me after a long time, only then I will be able to procreate children and then my dynasty will start. So therefore, this will delay the appearance of Krishna in my dynasty. This is a spiritual reason. But there is another reason from a Varnashram point of view, which also is highlighted by Prabhupada in the purport. So Maharaj Yadu was eager to engage himself in Lord's service, but there was an impediment. During the youth, the material desire to enjoy the material senses is certainly present. And unless one fully satisfies these lusty desires in youth, there is a chance of one's being disturbed in rendering service to the Lord. And we have actually seen that many sannyasis who accept sannyas prematurely, not having satisfied their material desires, fall down because they are disturbed. Therefore, the general process is to go through the grahastha life and vanaprastha life and finally come to sannyas and devote oneself completely to the service of the Lord. So Maharaj Yadu was ready to accept his father's order and exchange youth for the old age because he was confident that the youth taken by his father would be returned. But because this exchange would further delay his complete engagement in bhakti, he did not want to accept his father's old age, for he was eager to achieve freedom from disturbances. And of course, Yadu was eager to see the Lord's appearance in his dynasty. So if you see, I read the purport, Prabhupada is saying that the general process is to go through the different ashramas. Brahmachari, Grahastha, Vanaprastha, Sannyas. This is a general process. So what Narada Muni did to Haryesh is an exceptional case. And the exceptional cases for people with the exceptional qualification. But you cannot make the exceptional case into a normal system. But sometimes what happened is that the exceptional case was made into a normal system, and by making it to the normal system, many times the renunciation was accelerated. And then that had its own reaction in the that had its own effect, which we can see even in the history of ISKCON. Prabhupada, of course, did during the emergency. He gave sannyas to many people. That was an apad dharma. But then that apad dharma, during emergency, he accelerated renunciation for the sake of preaching and gave sannyas to very young people like 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, etc. Although they didn't have certain qualifications, etc. Prabhupada gave that as an emergency. But after Prabhupada's disappearance, that apad dharma, that emergency system was followed for a long time. Maybe even now in some places it may be followed. But it was the apad dharma situation for followed, that exceptional apad dharma is only for exceptional situation. It was followed for a long time, that had its own implications, which we can see in the history of the institution itself. So the general process is to go through the four ashramas, which Prabhupada also mentions in this purport. And even so, this general process of renunciation, we can also see with an example of a ripening of a mango. So the ripening of a mango takes its own time actually. But when people try to ripen the mango fast before the season for the sake of getting more profits by selling in the market, then they inject different chemicals into the mango and then they ripen the mangoes prematurely before the season. So they may earn short-term profits, but then it has its own implications that people who eat those chemically ripened mangoes, they get different diseases, cancer and different diseases. And the land in which those trees are grown, by pumping into extra chemicals when you ripen those mangoes, the land also becomes spoiled. You cannot grow much further in the long term. So similarly, when we try to ripen renunciation by giving some external force and by accelerating renunciation, that is neither good for that particular person nor good for the society who accept those renounced people, because they may consider that, oh, this person has developed a stable sense of renunciation, but in due course of time, when that person is not able to maintain that, some people may their faith can get shattered. Oh, this person, he underwent a fall, or by that the society also gets affected. So therefore, one has to respect the natural laws of nature, whether it is renunciation or even making soldiers. For example, in the Indian Air Force, suppose there are 20 seats, which are in 20 seats are supposed to be taken. 20 seats, 20 vacancies are there. But in the whole qualifying exercise, only 15 people got selected. They will keep the remaining 5 seats vacant. Just to fill up those 5 seats, they will not unnecessarily recruit unqualified people. So similarly, in making of the sadhus also, sometimes because there is a manpower requirement, or sometimes there is a money power requirement. So let us commercialize certain aspects of the temple. So we may get money in the short term, but because of commercializing certain aspects of the spiritual institution, the reputation of the spiritual institution will get spoiled in the long run. So because we are in need of manpower, we may try to canvass people and make some full-time devotees. In the short term, our problem may get solved, but in the long term, there will be implications of that. So therefore, it is said that so timing and rigor are of utmost importance to build something true to its purpose. So even in traditionally speaking, when traditional potters, when they want to make a pot, it is said that they will soak the soil in water for pottery, and that will be created, and that soil will be used by his kin 3 generations down. And the parts which are made through that process, that will last for years together. So therefore, even in an earthenware requires so much of time to be fully ready, then what to speak of human qualities? How can they appear so suddenly? How much more time must be required for the training and education? So in the Mahabharata, there is a verse which says that for a person to become mature, to attain realization, to attain the stable platform of detachment. So there are 5 aspects involved in it. First is learning from a bona fide guru, and second is self-study of Shastra, and third is one's own sadhana, tapasya, and fourth is mercy of the Supreme Lord, and fifth is the time aspect. So these factors naturally ripen the fragrant mango, like a student preparing him to offer real sweetness to the society. So therefore, this is what I wanted to mention was that the general process is to go through the gradual path of brahmachari, grahastha, vanaprastha, and sannyas. So usually, without going through this gradual process to develop a strong sense of detachment, it is very impossible unless a person has certain samskara from the past life or a great blessings from the devotees. So here, Prabhupada writes in the purport that by the blessings of Narada Muni, Haryashvas and Savalashvas, they developed a detachment. And another purport in the 5th canto, 1st chapter, another purport is that in the Privarata Maharaj's case, it's explained that when a person is surrounded by objects of sense enjoyment, but still to not get affected by that atmosphere and simply be engaged in devotional service and performing one's duties, that also requires that is also practically impossible. But even that becomes possible by the blessings of a great devotee. Because Priyavrata Maharaj was in the ashram of Narada Muni for a long time. But when Brahmaji came and requested, Swayambhu Manu came and requested Priyavrata Maharaj to become the king, Priyavrata was very reluctant. His reluctance was that if I become the king, if I get surrounded by the atmosphere of sense enjoyment, I will get distracted, and that will not be conducive for my progress in my path. So at that time, Brahmaji smiles at Priyavrata Maharaj. So what is the meaning of his smile? So Brahmaji looked upon him with a smile and with a compassionate face. So Brahmaji, by that smile, he said that although you will be when you take up the responsibility of being the king and when you enter the householder ashram, but you would not be out of touch with the devotional service by my blessings. So Prabhupada says that by the blessings of a Vaishnava, everything is possible. So everything is possible. Blessings make the impossible into possible. So what is impossible? To be surrounded by the atmosphere of sense enjoyment, at the same time to be completely focused in one's devotional service. At the same time, to have the internal sense of detachment is practically impossible. But by the blessings of a Vaishnava, impossible becomes possible. So similarly, that without going through the path of enjoyment, it is practically difficult to develop a stable sense of detachment, stable mood of detachment. But by the blessings of a Vaishnava, impossible can become possible. And that is highlighted by Prabhupada in the purport. And talking about Vairagya, I will also mention the verses from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. What does Rupa Goswami say about detachment in relation to bhakti? He says, Jnana Vairagyayor Bhakti Praveshaya Upayogita Ishat Pratamam Eveti Nangattam Uchitam Tayoho. A tiny bit of knowledge and renunciation are useful for entering into bhakti. That too in the very beginning. Praveshaya Upayogita. Ishat Pratamam Eva Iti. Therefore, it is not suitable to consider Jnana and Vairagya as limbs of bhakti. Na Angatvam Uchitam Tayoho. So, Jiva Goswami says in the purport, Bhakti Pravishtasya Vairagyam Chitta Katinya Hetutaya Heyatvena Uktam. So, for a person who has entered into bhakti, the over cultivation of renunciation is to be rejected because it will make one's heart hard. Chitta Katinya Hetutaya. Another place in the third part of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, he says that a devotee who over cultivates renunciation will lose out in Madhurya Rasa. Nivrittanu Payogitvad Duruhatvad Ayam Rasaha. The Madhurya Rasa is unfit to be relished by those who are too detached. So among those who are detached, there are individuals who think of all Madhurya Rasa as being similar to mundane romance. So thus such individuals stay away from Madhurya Rasa, even if it is given in the Bhagavatam. Such renunciants are ineligible. So therefore, this is some point Rupa Goswami mentions about renunciation in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. And another place in the Bhagavatam, Prabhupada talks about when should a person retire? Because here, one of the objection of Daksha Prajapati is that Narada Muni has made them renounce prematurely. So therefore, that is his allegation. So Prabhupada says that a person should retire as soon as the time is ripe, or as soon as one has developed perfect Krishna consciousness, or I would say that when a person has developed urgency, then one should retire, even though all his duties may not be fulfilled. As soon as a person has developed a perfect Krishna consciousness, one should retire, even though all his duties may not be fulfilled. So one is when the time is ripe, one should retire. And secondly, even before the time, if a person has attained that maturity, if a person has developed that maturity and realization, even his duties are not be fulfilled, then one may retire. So these 2 points. In the case of Haryeshwar Savalashwas, by Narada Muni's instruction, it is not that Narada Muni kept on canvassing. You see, Narada Muni just spoke only one verse. He just spoke only one verse actually. And then he left that place. Haryashvas on their own, they understood the meaning of that verse. So it is not something like a typical brainwashing where people speak about, say, miseries of, say, householder life, on, and then they make a imprint. Narada Muni just spoke one verse and then they understood on their own. So it was a self-inspired actually in that sense, by the mercy of Narada Muni. And then one more verse I want to highlight related to this Daksha Prajapati statement here. So Daksha Prajapati said that only by experiencing sense gratification, then a person can develop a proper sense of detachment. But in the Bhagavatam 7th canto, Narada Muni says that Upyamanam Muhukshetram Swayam Nirviryatam Yat Na Kalpate Punasutyai Uptam Bijam Nan Cha Nashyati Evam Kamashayam Chittam Kamanam Atisevaya Virajeta Yatarajan Agnivat Kama Bindubihi. So Narada is telling to Yudhishthira Maharaj, my dear king, if an agricultural land is cultivated again and again, the power of its production decreases. So sometimes, see, in agriculture, when you cultivate something, next crop, you have to put something else. And then you may have to put something else. Like that, there is a particular science is there. But if you keep putting the same crop again and again, and especially through chemical agriculture, and then in due course of time, the power of the productivity of that particular land will decrease. And whatever seeds will be sown, they will get lost. And another analogy is given. So just as drops of ghee on a fire never extinguish the fire, but a flood of ghee will extinguish. Similarly, overindulgence in lusty desires mitigates such desires entirely. Like Krishna says that Kamayesha Krodayesha Rajoguna Samudbhavaha Mahashano Mahapapma Vidyena Miha Vairina. He says that feeding Kama is like feeding fuel to the fire. It will only increase the fire. But sometimes when you feed huge quantity of fuel, there is a possibility that fire can get extinguished by the fuel. Suppose the fire is there, but there's a small Agni Kund is there, and suppose if you suddenly pour, say, 100 kilos of ghee, then the fire will get extinguished also. So similarly, overindulgence in lusty desires mitigates such desires entirely. So this point of Daksha Prajapati is also approved in this particular verse in the Bhagavatam. But then Prabhupada writes a purport. If one continuously sprinkles drops of ghee on a fire, the fire will not be extinguished. But if one suddenly puts a lump of ghee on a fire, the fire may possibly be extinguished entirely. Similarly, those who are too sinful and have thus been born in the lower classes are allowed to enjoy sinful activities fully. For thus, there is a chance that these activities will become detestful in them and they will get the opportunity to be purified. So what is to be noted is that, there is a possibility that the fire can get extinguished by adding fuel. But the first condition is that you need a huge quantity of fuel, not some simple quantity. You need a huge quantity of fuel to extinguish that fire. That means to develop detachment by enjoying sense gratification, you need to exhaustively overindulge in sense gratification. And for that, you need lot of resources for sense gratification. And you need to have a lot of capacity in your body to enjoy sense gratification. And secondly, even after huge resources and overindulgence, there is only a possibility. That is why Prabhupada says that the fire may possibly be extinguished. May possibly be extinguished. It is not a surety. May possibly be extinguished. And then the third point is that because of overindulgence in sense gratification, there is also side effects also. There is also side effects. Like for example, in the Western society, the hippies are they overindulge in sense gratification, and because of overindulgence, they also developed a detachment. Then they started looking for something higher, and then they also developed a sense of detachment because of excessive indulgence. But then they also underwent. They also had a there were also reactions of the overindulgence. Psychologically, they went through so many problems because of overindulgence. In the teenage itself, they overindulge in sense gratification, and then when they grew up, although they developed a sense of detachment, when they grew up, they developed a lot of psychological problems, and they developed a lot of physical problems, physical diseases. So, although overindulgence in sense gratification may result in detachment, but for that you need a huge quantity of sense enjoyment, and there is only a chance that it may get the desire for sense enjoyment may get extinguished. And thirdly, there will also be psychological implications and different physical diseases associated with it. So another place in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, when Sanatana Goswami, after escaping from the jail, when he comes to meet Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, the movements of the super soul are very grave. By his mercy, although you had so much of wealth, you have become so detached. Yeta kahi kahe Prabhu shuna sanatana, Krishna bada dayamaya patita pavana. My dear Sanatan, please hear from me. Krishna is very merciful and he is the deliverer of all fallen souls. Maharaurava haite toma karila uddhara, Kripara samudra Krishna gambira apara. Krishna has saved you from the Maharaurava hell, the life's deepest hell. He is an ocean of mercy and his activities are very grave. Gambira apara. So here that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is telling that Krishna enlightened Sanatana Goswami in such a way that he was able to give up his exalted post as a minister. Thinking his material position insignificant, Sanatana was prepared to become a mendicant. Appreciating the activities of Sanatana Goswami, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu praised his action and thanked Krishna for his mercy upon him. So therefore, that sense of detachment is one sense of mercy of Krishna. And I was reading Ramayana a few days back. So regarding the birth of the four brothers, Ram, Lakshman, Bharat and Shatrughna, very beautiful Siddhanta is spoken. Ram represents Dharma, Lakshman represents Artha, Shatrughna represents Kama, and Bharata represents Moksha. So, generally speaking, Dharma occupies 1/2 of the person's life. So, Ram was born from the 1/2 of the payasam drank by Kaushalya. Kaushalya was given 1/2 of the payasam. And Kaikeyi was given 1/8 of the payasam. Sumitra was given 1/4 plus 1/8. Sumitra gave birth to Lakshman and Shatrughna. Kaikeyi gave birth to Bharat. So Ram represents Dharma. So Dharma occupies 1/2 of the person's life. Moksha, although it is the ultimate goal, but according to this interpretation, Moksha represents 1/8 of a person's life. And the Artha represents 1/4 of the person's life. And Kama represents 1/8 of a person's life. So here, Sumitra is the mother of Lakshman and Shatrughna. So Lakshman represents Artha, Shatrughna represents Kama. So the principle is that Artha and Kama should never be kept together. If Artha and Kama are kept together, then they will ruin a person's life. So Sumitra, being a magnanimous mother, she engaged Lakshman in the service of Ram and Shatrughna in the service of Bharat. That means she engaged Artha in the service of Dharma and she engaged Kama in the service of Moksha. So that means Artha should become subordinate to Dharma. So Artha should be directed by Dharma. And our Kama should be directed towards Moksha. So Lakshman engaged in the Bhagavata, the Bhagavan Seva, and Shatrughna engaged in the Bhagavata Seva. Shatrughna engaged in the Bhagavata Seva. So when the Artha overpowers Dharma, then that is nothing but the materialistic life. When the Artha overpowers Dharma, and when the Kama overpowers Moksha, that is also the materialistic life. But a spiritual life means Artha is subordinate to Dharma, Artha is directed by Dharma, Lakshman is engaged in the service of Ram, and our Kama is directed towards Moksha. That means our desire is to get out of the material world, to attain Moksha. This also we can see, we can learn a lesson from the birth of Ram, Lakshman, Bharat and Shatrughna. And another point is that when Artha is subordinate to Dharma, because Dharma is the 1/2 of a person's life and Artha is the 1/4 of the person's life. So when a person leads a life, when a person leads 3/4 of the life by making Artha subordinate to Dharma, the natural result of this life will be a person will develop a Kama which will be directed towards Moksha. That means he will develop a desire for Moksha. So this is also the Siddhanta from Ram, Bharat, Shatrughna. That means by leading a dharmic life, by earning one's Artha, by following Dharma, then one will naturally develop a desire to get detached from this world and to attain Moksha. And for the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, the Moksha means Muktir Hitva Anyata Rupam Swarupena Vyavasthiti. There are two parts. Hitva Anyata Rupam, giving up our identities, our designations towards this world, and Swarupena Vyavasthiti, being situated in one's constitutional position as a servant of the Lord. And specifically speaking, the Moksha or the Mukti is the Panchama Purushartha, love of Krishna, as taught by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So this is also something we can see in relation to this point. And another very beautiful purport Prabhupada writes in the first canto. So when we talk about this Varnashram system, it is such a scientific system. So the Varnashram system, the purpose of the entire system is to progress on the path of self-realization. Purpose of the Ashrama Dharma and of course Varna Dharma. Varna Dharma is for occupation. The purpose of Ashram Dharma is to progress on the path of self-realization. And the Ashrama Dharma is also dependent on the Varna Dharma. Both are interrelated. The main purpose of Ashrama Dharma is to awaken transcendental knowledge and detachment. So in that Ashrama Dharma, Brahmachari Ashram is the training ground for the prospective candidates. So in the training, one is trained that the material world is not the actual home of the living being. And the conditioned souls are under the bondage. One is told that self-realization is the ultimate goal. But at the same time, generally speaking, majority of the people, they will actually go through the normal process of Brahmachari, Grahastha, Vanaprastha, Sannyas. That is why Bhagavatam 3rd canto talks about 4 types of Brahmachari ashram. I'm not remembering the exact technical names now. I think Savitra, Prajapatya, and and 2 more names are there. So one type of brahmachari ashram is that a person observes the brahmachari vrata for 3 days after the Upanayana samskar. And second is a person observes the brahmachari vrata for 1 year after the Upanayana samskar. And third type of brahmachari is that a person observes the brahmachari vrata till a person completes the study of the Vedas in the ashram of a guru, and then he gets married. And the fourth type of brahmachari ashram is a person after brahmachari ashram, a person directly goes to sannyas. So these 4 types of brahmachari ashram are given. So, but majority of the people will be in the first 3 ashramas. So brahmachari ashram is a training ground for the prospective candidates. And then Prabhupada says that the whole system of ashrama dharma is a means of detachment. And one who fails to assimilate the spirit of detachment is allowed to enter the grahastha life with the same spirit of detachment. That means with the same goal in mind, one is supposed to enter the grahastha ashram. And therefore, one who attains detachment may at once adopt the 4th order, namely renounced order, and thus live on charity only. So household life is for one who is attached, and the vanaprastha and sannyas orders of life are for those who are detached from material life. And the brahmachari ashram is especially meant for training both the attached and the detached. It is a training for both the grahastha ashram and as well as for vanaprastha and sannyas ashram. So brahmachari ashram is like a training ground actually. So sometimes there was once a conversation between a CEO and a HR manager of a company. And the CEO was telling that, why should we spend so much of time for training and education? Because many people get trained and then they don't stay in our company and they leave the company. We end up actually spending so much of money for training and education. It is useless. They don't contribute so much to our company. And the HR manager said that, which will you prefer? Trained people leaving the company or untrained people staying in the company? So trained people leaving the company, okay, they are not contributing to the company. But untrained people, for that sake, if you stop giving training, then only untrained people will be there and they will stay in the company and they may be loyal to the company, but because they are untrained, they will create great damage to the company in the long run. So therefore, better to, even if the trained people leave, better to train them. That is the better method. So similarly, any spiritual institution, that when we focus on proper training, and even if the trained person leaves, say for example, say somebody leaves the brahmachari ashram, but wherever he is there, he will contribute. It may be to some other temple, some other part of the society, some other country.
Excuse me, milk.
Pal. So when we train people, even if the trained people say when they relocate to some other place, then they will definitely contribute to some other place, some other thing. So therefore, the training is important. Prabhupada says that brahmachari ashram is meant for training both the attached and the detached, for the grahastha ashram as well as for the vanaprastha and sannyas ashram. So therefore, there is a beautiful verse in the Raghu Vamsha about the kings in the Raghu dynasty. Shaishave abhyasta vidyanam yavane vishayaishinam vardake munivrittinam yogenante tanutyacham. The kings of Raghu dynasty, during their youth, during their childhood, they devoted themselves for learning Shastra. And during their youth, they enjoyed sense gratification in a dharmic way. And during the old age, they observed Muni Vritti. That means they observed, they followed Vanaprastha ashram, they observed silence, detachment, tapasya. And then at the end, they also attained perfection. Yoge nante tanutyajam. So oftentimes in Kali Yuga, so when we don't follow the normal system, sometimes when the dharma of one ashram is extrapolated to another ashram. Say, for example, the dharma of a renounced order is extrapolated to the grahastha order, grahastha ashram. And then when you accelerate detachment in them, and then they act in that platform, and then on the wrong time when they are supposed to be detached, and then at that time they start enjoying sense gratification. So one should not extrapolate the dharma of one ashram into another ashram. And so, or vice versa also. Sometimes the grahastha ashram dharma may be extrapolated to the renounced order. Yeah, sometimes renunciants may live more comfortable than a grahastha, like that. So therefore, it is important to follow the dharmas of the ashrams as far as possible at the right time. And for that, one of the most important thing is the training, which Prabhupada emphasizes in the purport in the first canto, 9th chapter. So, covered almost all the points which I wanted to share. So to summarize what we discussed about different types of three types of temporary vairagya, and then we discussed about what is the stable vairagya, what is important, transcendental knowledge and highly taste. And then we discussed different examples from Maharaj Yadu, some verses from the 10th canto. The point mentioned by Daksha Prajapati is also mentioned elsewhere in the Bhagavatam, how by experiencing one can develop detachment. But then there are adhikaris for different paths. We mentioned that. So these are some points which I wanted to share about on this topic. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Dandavat Pranam Prabhuji. Please accept my respectful obeisances. I would like to know, do you have time for question answers, or would you like to end the session, because I need to know
Few
your
questions I can take.
schedules.
Few questions.
Okay. I'll request our respectful devotees, Sukhkar Prabhuji, Hare Krishna, Dandavat Pranam. Could you please go ahead with the question?
Hare Krishna, Jyoti Mataji, thank you very much for the chance. And Radhika, your class are really so exhaustive. You covered this and that, and no, where to us, everything you're clear. I just want to find out one thing, that you said that daily class and all these things are very good. I find Bhakti Sangha is doing the best thing, because they got Bhagavatam in the afternoon and the Chaitanya Bhagavatam in the night, and again in between Lilamrita. I think this type of organization should be more and more, so that like devotees like you can come and spell out the whole thing, because you are covering this end to that end. And today we discussed so many points. Thank you very much, Prabhu. It's really cleared so many things.
Hare Krishna. Thank you for accepting my small service, despite my lot of doshas, lot of mistakes. Thank you.
Fantastic. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Sukhkar Prabhuji. Thank you. Hare Krishna. Prahlad Anand Prabhuji, could you please go ahead and accept my respectful obeisances at your lotus feet? Please ask your question. Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much, Mataji. And then we pranam to Radhika Vallabha Prabhuji and all the Vaishnava Mataji and everyone here. I just wanted to, express my thoughts as I went through your lecture. In Bhagavatam, it says that Loke Vyavayamis Madhya Seva. All the conditioned souls come here for sense gratification. All of us have that desire. Amis Madhya Seva. Vyavayamis Madhya. Okay, so we come here and, we are trying for maximizing our pleasure in this material world. Sukhai karmani karuti loke na tat sukham anyad uparam va vindet bhuyat tatra dukh evam Yadatra Yuktam Bhagwan Vadendra. I think Vidur ji is asking this question to Maitreya. And Maitreya ji, I think he answered that Ase Sankle Samam Vidat Gunan Sravanam Gunan. So in my own experience, I have experienced it, that having taken shelter of Srila Prabhupada and great Vaishnavas and developing bhakti, whatever little we can do, it actually works. It actually works in a way that you can still enjoy the material sense gratification, and gradually you're getting detached. As you have mentioned, that grand vairagya and the mercy of the devotees. So this is the kind of the feeling I developed from hearing your lecture. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak, Prabhuji. Hari Bol.
Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Raj Prabhuji is giving you, saying that it was an amazing class, and he is giving you wishes of Happy New Year and Ekadashi. And Shavni Mataji is also giving you Danvat Pranams and saying that it was a beautiful association and wonderful class. Prabhuji, I have questions. Prabhuji, you said about the mercy and the blessings of, there is a mercy and there is a blessing coming from pure devotee and Krishna Bhagwan. So how one will understand what is the mercy and what is the blessings, and which is coming from pure devotee and which is coming from Krishna? How to differentiate that? How we will understand?
Mercy of Krishna comes through the devotees only. So see, when a living entity is, Prabhupada says, when a living entity is seeking Krishna, then Krishna guides that living entity to a bona fide guru. And then when a person follows the instructions of a bona fide guru, and due course of time, when a person becomes mature, then then Krishna directly speaks to that person. So initially, the mercy of Krishna comes through the devotees only. And when a person follows the instructions of a guru, then when a person becomes liberated, then Krishna directly speaks to him. Dadami buddhi yogam tam yena mamukayantiti. So.
And what is the blessings then? Means how to differentiate between the mercy and blessing?
Mercy, blessings, both are same. Both are same age.
Prabhuji, you also mentioned about the portion of the life, like 1/8, 1/3. I have not able to understand it. Could you please just pinpoint portion of life? You were saying about dharma, artha, kama, moksha, and you said that 1/2 of life. So of dharma, if the person is, then what exactly happens? I mean, the renunciation.
Generally, like so much of time goes in for occupational duties. Generally speaking, unless a person is say sannyasi who is fully engaged in say only in direct bhakti, but otherwise for a normal person, half the time goes in different duties of his varna and ashram. So Lord Ram was born from 1/4 of the payasam actually. So generally for a normal person, half the life goes in different duties. And then 1/4 of the life goes in earning wealth, artha. But that 1/4 of that artha part should be made subordinate to dharma. But when people earn artha without thinking whether I'm following dharma or not, then artha becomes a prominent over dharma, then that is the materialistic life. Then a person will only have karma directed towards the sense gratification, and that karma is the greatest enemy. But when the artha is made subordinate to dharma, then a person will actually will develop the karma directed towards moksha. That is the point actually. In that sense, the Vedas talk about gradual path and also the direct path. In the gradual path, even when a person is following one's dharma properly and earning artha only by following dharma, by giving preference to dharma, then one will naturally develop a desire for to get out of the material world. He'll develop a karma directed towards moksha. That is the understanding.
Prabhuji, and you said that there is a possibility of one person to get a direct sannyasi after brahmachari by blessings. So, Prabhuji, how one will sustain the detachment practice if one gets the direct? If, say, a person is getting a blessings and the mercy from the pure devotee as well as from Krishna, and he goes into the sannyasi ashram directly. So then what is the possibility or what is the practice that he does for sustaining that detachment?
So you see in this case of Haryashva's only, Haryashva's case, Narada Muni saw that they were already qualified, they were already pure. That is first point. And second thing is Narada Muni gave transcendental knowledge, but in a very he gave transcendental knowledge to them, and then they developed a detachment. And then when they entered sannyas, they have to regularly practice. They have to be regularly been studying the shastras and following the path of detachment. They have to follow the particular dharma by engaging in devotional service. So it cannot be sustained unless a person is regularly in touch with the shastras. So, but it cannot be made into a system. Like Narada Muni could make Haryashvas like that. But when this is made into a system, like you make for every youth as a make them full-time devotees, then that will run into a failure, because Narada Muni did not blindly make them into inspire them to become sannyasis. He also saw that they had that kind of disposition, and then he inspired in that way. So although theoretically speaking, by blessings of a Vaishnava, anything can be possible, but we cannot make a system. Okay, I'm giving blessing to this all these youth, and therefore I'm going to make them all join full time. I'm going to make them all sannyas. We cannot make that into a system. But certain these exceptional cases are also seen. So Prabhupada is saying, Prabhupada is writing the purport. The boys and girls in the Krishna consciousness movement, by the mercy of Lord Chaitanya, they have joined, like that. He's talking about the mercy aspect. But when you see historically speaking, Prabhupada must have written the purport in 1970s. But historically speaking, if you see in the ISKCON history, those who joined at that time, which Prabhupada is referring, yeah, they all continue to be devotees, but many of them, they may not be, very few maybe continue to remain as a full-time devotee and then became sannyasis. Most of them, maybe they got married and they continued the practice of bhakti. So historically speaking, that is a fact actually. So therefore, when we are preaching Krishna consciousness, in order for a person to practice bhakti in a stable way, you need the platform of varnashram. So bhakti and dharma both are required. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur very clearly mentions that as long as a person has material desires, one should follow sadhana bhakti within the confines of varnashram system, and then that is a stable path, and that will be when a person is situated according to one's varna and ashram, he can sustainably practice bhakti in the long run, and that will create a proper legacy for the future. And therefore, Prabhupada mentioned 50% is to establish varnashram.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna, Dandavat pranams to you. Sukukar Prabhuji, could you please go ahead, Sukukar Prabhuji? Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Mataji. Hare Krishna. Thank you. Yes, Prabhuji, one question I wanted to find out. See, the people are following Krishna consciousness in a very Tibra way, following Srila Prabhupada. But in spite of all these things, there is a fall sometimes. What is the reason? How do they protect themselves from this Maya attack? No, The sannyasi level is falling into what can be the, how it can be covered.
So quite a general question. See, we have to see from multiple angles. Sometimes certain issues are seen only from some angle, but there are also to see from multiple angles. So, for example, say giving sannyas prematurely, that is also a mistake from the point of your organization. So that point is sometimes that point is neglected. Sometimes we only talk about, oh, this person committed a mistake, he fell from that. So that is there. But then there is another point is that, say, when you prematurely empower a person to a level more than what he is, that is a mistake on the part of the organization. Prabhupada did that during emergency, but later that was not supposed to be continued. Prabhupada clearly mentioned. And for example, say Gurukul, traditionally speaking, Gurukul is never handled by a sannyasi actually. We always see a Guru and a Guru Patni. Guru and a Guru Patni. That is the Vedic culture. The science of Vedic culture, you cannot just whimsically compromise by saying that we can compromise these principles for the sake of Krishna. That is, we can compromise certain principles only in certain emergency. So, but otherwise, certain system science has to be followed. So then, who is responsible for that? Actually, appointing suppose a person, the known started to run the Gurukul. The people, the organization, they also have certain responsibility, is it not? So therefore, one has to analyze from multiple angles. So it is not that it is not that only somebody fell victim to Maya, and from the person's point of view, there could be some Vaishnava aparadh, or there could be. It's not that only Vaishnava aparadh is the only reason. Some aparadh may be there. Sometimes the person may become complacent, or a person may not be determined. Many other reasons may be there. So, but the process definitely works, and one has to follow the proper system. One has to see from multiple angles.
But in general, for all the devotees to protect from the Maya completely, because however good your sadhana is, there still it affects. Is it only because of Vaishnava aparadh or because there's some lacking?
See, because in bhakti, when you are progressing in the bhakti, there is a stage of anishtita bhajana kriya, unsteady stage of practice. And Vishwanath Chakravartipad has mentioned different symptoms of anishtita bhajana kriya. So, and then he also says that how to progress from anishtita to nishtita bhajana kriya, which is also there. So when we persevere, we remain patient in the anishtita bhajana kriya while going through that unsteady phase. So there was in the anishtita bhajana kriya, sometimes a person may go through a bipolar syndrome. There was a film director who made a movie in which the hero had a bipolar personality. At a certain time, he would behave in a particular way, and then suddenly his personality would change. So similarly, even all the sadhana bhaktas, if you analyze, we may also go through this bipolar personality. Sometimes we may do something which later we regret. How did I do that actually? How did I do that? We may. So sometimes we go through this bipolar personality. That is what is anishtita bhajana kriya is about. But then, by proper sadhu sangha and by continuing to perform on sadhana, it is possible to progress to the nishtita bhajana kriya.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you very much. Thank you, Jyotima.
Thank you, Subhakar Prabhuji. Prabhuji, there is one more question from Danagati Devi Mataji. She's asking, Hare Krishna Prabhuji, you talked about 4 different kinds of intelligence from the nectar of instructions. How does one develop first class intelligence? Hare Krishna.
It is completely up to the person's choice, actually. It is the choice is there with the person. Whether I want to develop first class intelligence or I want to see the experience of others or personally experience, choice is there with the person. So it is, and also we can say by association with the proper sadhu sangha, one can develop determination. But even then, at certain point, one has to make that choice. When one may get the sadhu sangha also, but then the sadhus may give instruction, but still one has to implement that choice. So it is by proper use of one's free will.
Thank you, Prabhuji, for the
Hare
beautiful
Krishna.
answer. Hare Krishna. Raj Prabhuji and Vrinda Gopika Mataji, Jayananda Gaur Hari Prabhuji, Shivani Mataji has given you respectful obeisances. The class was very beneficial and wonderful, and the teachings were very insightful. I don't see any more hand raised, Prabhuji. So
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. I was just, it's not a question. Aditi Devi Dasi here. Please accept my humble obeisances.
Yes, Mata. Yes.
Prabhuji, you said, when we do the charity, we need to fast couple of hours and then do the charity. So, for example, today is Ekadashi. I try to, with the grace of Krishna, I try to do some donation for Annadan. So I wake up at 3:30 in the morning. So I did like around 6 o'clock. Is that okay?
It's fine. No problem. No problem. But
No
I
problem.
just mentioned some of the rules. But it is sometimes it's not that there are certain rules mentioned in the Dharma Shastras. But when it comes to rules of devotional, this one, sometimes they take precedence over the Dharma Shastra rules.
Mm-hmm.
But as a matter of fact, I mentioned certain rules of Dharma Shastra in giving charity.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna. Wonderful class. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Aditi Mataji. Anyone have any more questions? Okay, Prabhuji, I don't see any more hand raised.
Okay.
Here is the end of the call. Prabhuji, thank you so much for your session. Eternally grateful to you, and we are looking forward for your association again. And this session was really in the depth. We have to listen so many times to understand it, and especially me. And thank you so much. Respectful devotees, let's pay our obeisances to Prabhuji. Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Prabhupada ji ki jai. His Grace Radhika
Vallabha Prabhu ki jai.
Gauranga, Nityananda.
Thank you.